Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, we have another very special guest with us, Nurse Hebe from Markham Stouffville Hospital. She is a new graduate registered nurse, and she works in the stroke and rehab unit. Welcome.
Thank you, Albert.
So I understand that you only recently graduated and became a nurse, and that itself is commendable. But to enter like the healthcare industry during such a drastic pandemic is a whole other story. So I want to congratulate you for that. I understand that you must be very busy, so I do truly appreciate your time to speak with me today.
No worries, Albert.
So I guess just to start off, could you describe why you decided to become a nurse and what you expected your job to look like before the pandemic?
To be honest, actually was uncertain about my decision about becoming a nurse until not like 2 years into my nursing study. Back in high school, I chose nursing as my major going to uni simply because I feel like it was my only option. First of all, I had very little, I had very little talent in math and computer. English isn't my first language too, so I avoided going for linguistic or liberal arts. My parents' ultimate expectation at that time for me was going to something that was eventually going to land me a job. So health science was pretty much my only option at the time. And nursing just sounded very promising to me and to them as well. So yeah, so with that being said, I basically spent my first 2 years in nursing struggling, questioning whether I made the right decision or not until I got my clinical placement. It was that I become determined that I want to be a nurse. I started my clinical placement, and so it's like a unpaid co-op some sort. So I basically had to go into hospitals and actually practice as a nurse there. It was then I kind of realized, like, despite such an introverted person I am, I actually enjoy, spending time with my patients, with colleagues, and actually found like huge pleasure just through, interactions with them, even though not doing anything, just being there, listening to their stories, going through different stages of their life with them. And the fact that I also was able to play a role in their recovery and support them in their worst time just really delighted my days. So it was really until then I figured out that this occupation is right for me. And then that I became certain that I want to pursue my career as a nurse. And right now I'm just really grateful that I made this decision. What was the second part of the question again?
I think it was just about like maybe like what you expected the job to look like before the pandemic, like what you expected a regular day to look like.
Before the pandemic, well, it would be just like a busy day. I would say like we're always doing 12 hours shift. But before the pandemic, I definitely didn't expect that many infection control measures to be in place. So I actually didn't expect that high of a nurse to patient ratio as well. Right now, like on my unit, where our ratio is 1 nurse to 5 patients, and how I was expecting was like, maybe 1 to 4. But yeah, given the circumstance, we're 1 to 5 now. And before, actually, I haven't really thought about it. I just feel like it's probably just going to be busy, but now it's just becoming busier because we have to do all the infection measures and making sure that we're doing them properly. So that's like super time consuming, having to don and doff our isolation gowns, masks, face shields, all these things just take up extra time. And yeah, so it's same but different. Like we do the things we would normally do still, like we would go in there but it's just have to be extra cautious of what we do because we might bring something to our patient and we might bring something home, right? With COVID, yeah.
So I think you talked a little bit about it, but I know for a fact that like when you were studying to become a nurse, you didn't predict like the pandemic. So you probably imagine, and when you finally realized that you wanted to become a nurse, you kind of realized that there was like this specific part that you enjoyed about it. But I think the pandemic definitely kind of shifted that. Could you describe how the pandemic has maybe shifted like your responsibilities and like the situation at Markham Stouffville Hospital in particular?
Um, as with my responsibility though, I don't feel like as nothing really shifted because everything was pretty much new to me because I'm a new grad myself. So like the responsibility, everything that I take on right now is pretty much new to me. But like speaking from like a general perspective though, I would say like the responsibility on nurses are just heavier now in general compared to before because like our patients are dependent on us even more and so are the families. They're pretty much dependent on us too because like we have very limited visitors per day. Like back then, during the time when my unit was on outbreak, we didn't allow any visitors. Even like now, like it's very few visitors we allow. So with that being said, like us as nurses, we just have to be making sure that our patients are supported, like both emotionally and physiologically. So we have to provide that extra attention and emotional support to both the patients and family members because they cannot make that connection themselves anymore. So like we have to physically establish that connections for them, like whether it's setting up phone calls, FaceTimes, or just arranging like essential visits, making sure that like wishes are fulfilled, making sure that we're giving frequent updates to the family. So all these are responsibilities we've been taking on before the pandemic, but now we're just doing them even more. Like we're doing them basically every day, repetitively. And yeah, that's pretty much what I noticed.
Yeah, so actually, a few days ago, I had the pleasure of interviewing a doctor that was a palliative care physician.
Mhm.
And so they described, because they've been a physician for several years, and they described that since the pandemic, it's been very difficult to kind of connect with the patients on the same level that they had before. And they found that part very emotionally challenging for them because they saw that because they were in palliative care, a lot of their
Mhm.
patients were passing away and they didn't
Mhm.
have connections with their family and it was difficult to communicate with them.
Mhm.
Do you feel the same way?
I do. I actually I had this experience like past few weeks ago. And yeah, the patient was deteriorating, but all the family couldn't do anything. All we had to do was like set up FaceTime calls. And with that, like even with that FaceTime call, like there isn't much that they can do. Like they can't hold the patient, they can't talk to him by his ears, so he pretty much couldn't hear anything, couldn't communicate, his eyes are not even opening. So it's really it's the only way to communicate, but I would say it's a most ineffective way. So but there isn't much we can do, and it's pretty frustrating from time to time for nurses, I would say, for doctors as well, seeing that patients cannot connect to their family members. And also yeah, it's also for us as well, trying to it's best that the family can come in and we can talk to them about patient conditions face to face, right? But we can't do that anymore, so it's pretty frustrating.
Yeah, so I know you entered kind of the healthcare industry during the pandemic, but
Mhm.
have you noticed any kind of changes that maybe the industry has made to try and address the problems that you just discussed?
um well, I would say from what I know, not really. It's just what we like they've been doing, like FaceTime calls and trying to bring in essential visitors. Definitely have like social workers on site, chaplain on site. But yeah, I doubt that's an effective way. Honestly, I think the best way to connect patient and family members would be having them really meet each other and have that physical contact. But it's hard to do now.
Yeah, so working on the front line, I'm certain along like you along with your coworkers, your friends, and maybe even your family, you've seen sort of like a perspective on the pandemic that's different from like the average person. How has that actually like impacted you and those near you?
Um, I haven't come across my friends like since the pandemic started. I feel like it impacted me and my families more 'cause I am pretty much around them. I impacted them like like everyone else, but like it's just on top of that, they have me and the household, so they have to be extra cautious of what they do, where they go. For my parents, they pretty much eliminated all their all their contact. They The last time I remember them going out was only for grocery. It's been like since a year since they ever going to like a party or meeting someone, even just outside the street, you know. And it's I kind of feel sorry for them because like they have to take on all those risks with me. But then on the other side, there isn't much I can do. All I have to do is like I have to make sure that I do my job right at my work and making sure that I am really taking care of myself, and then so that I don't bring anything to home to them. Yeah, so it's really about the emotional part, like having them going through the same struggle that I do because I work in the front line, so they have to be really mindful of themselves too. Yeah, and then putting them at that risk.
Yeah, again, so I know that you joined as a nurse during the
Mhm,
pandemic, but what
mhm,
you studied for in med school probably was a little bit different from what you expect and what you do now. So
mhm.
when you actually entered into Markham Stouffville Hospital, did you feel like prepared to take on the pandemic's challenges?
Definitely not. No, so no, not even close to be ready. That time, well, because I was new. I'm still new now, so like as a new nurse, I would say I'm not prepared, mainly because I have very minimal experience in that field. Like I had no idea how nursing is like in general, like in the actual hospital, and I had no idea how pandemic is like in the hospital. So yeah, it was a lot to learn. Challenges are basically every day, like from the smallest task, like donning and doffing, like putting on my isolation gowns, remembering that I have to wipe my face shields, you know, and then to like all these things, like all the medical nursing stuff that I have to learn. So yeah, it's pretty challenging for me. And then I didn't feel ready. I still feel like I'm still learning and the challenges are still there for me. But you know, I feel like nursing though, it's really, how do you say it? Like undertaking challenges is really part of nursing. Like as nurses, we take on challenges every day. We face different situations every day. So it's very important to have this open mindset and be ready to adapt to changes and just to really be optimistic of what's ahead of us. Yeah, that's how I felt.
Yeah, again, so I think it's very commendable that you joined as a nurse in the middle of a pandemic. And
Uh-huh.
you said you didn't feel very prepared, but at the same
Yeah,
time, I think joining while still feeling a little unprepared is very
uh-huh.
commendable and very courageous.
Thank you.
Um, so having said that, what do you, as you spoke of change, what do you
Mhm.
see kind of like nursing looking like in the future? What do you expect to do once the pandemic is over?
Once I don't know how long it's gonna take for this pandemic to be over, honestly, but definitely I would say healthcare and nursing, especially, is definitely going to be a growing industry in the coming years, because you know, like the baby boomers are coming to their retirement age, which means there's going to be a tremendous need on healthcare workers in all different fields, especially nursing. So yeah, it's just I'm looking forward to it, and I hope that we have more nurses to join us to take care of our next coming patient population.
Yeah, so I think you mentioned a little bit about this earlier, and I do want to
Uh-huh.
revisit it a little bit. You talked
Mhm.
about how maybe your friends and family have been impacted by the virus, by the pandemic.
Mhm.
How does your family and your friends actually feel about you going to work every day and, risking your life potentially, like coming into contact with this virus and saving
Uh-huh.
lives?
Well, as for my friends, they basically avoided meeting me or having any contact with me. So, yeah, it's been a year since I last saw them. And yeah, they're pretty much worried about me. And then I feel like I was the only source of information, like with COVID, like they always come to me instead of going to onto the news to see like how things are going outside. They're like, oh, how you think COVID has been doing? Like, how is the cases in your hospitals? Like, they're always concerned. They always ask. But yeah, as for my friends, my family, it's just my parents. They're worried. They're just really saying that, oh, do what you have to do, but like they don't really support me the going at this time like into nursing. Really didn't want me to go get a job at this time, but I did. So yeah, and I just told them it's okay that because we're actually having a pandemic under control now. Like say my unit, we actually resolved all the COVID cases and we're officially out of outbreak. And I would say, you know, the future ahead of us is pretty bright. And then always just trying to enforce that to them, just telling them that it's fine, you know, I'll be okay, and just make sure that they protect themselves too. And yeah, just really reinforcing, telling them that hospital is safe now. It's not as bad as before.
Right. So you mentioned a little bit about this, but like how your friends kind of try to avoid physical contact with you, how you don't really want to like meet in person with your parents. What kind of rules are there in place in the hospital? And like what kind of rules have you set for yourself to prevent the spread of the pandemic?
So rules in the hospital definitely like visitor policies. So we're not only allowing like essential visitors to come in, like basically like the next of kin to come in to see a patient, and they're like very limited number of visitors per day, and then like very limited visiting hour too, like 1 hour per person. And there are very limited things they can bring in. They don't, and then they can't bring food and they can't bring drink. A lot of things they cannot bring. That's like the policy that I am aware of in the hospital. And then as for like nurses, healthcare workers in general, it's just like, you know, all the infection prevention measures like isolation gowns, masks, gloves, and face shield, everything that we have to really change and in between patient contact. So that's there in the hospital. And I feel like that's going to be a new trend now. Like we're going to do that for a very long time period, despite the fact that the pandemic might be over soon. We're still going to do that just to be extra cautious. And as for my friend, like what was the question again? Like how did they?
Right. So the question was like how you might have set rules for yourself to prevent like,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Okay, to myself though, just really eliminating any possible um, contact with anyone, like only like essential, say my parents, like I can avoid not seeing them. Like I come home every day, but otherwise I haven't met a friend for a very long time. And I try to do things on my own, try to figure out things by myself so that I don't have to go to them, and then like just trying to do some self-care without having to gather with my friends. I feel like that's some of the rules I set for myself. And then definitely, you know, wear masks all the time. And I know the vaccines are out, but and probably healthcare workers are getting them, but still masks are just becoming essential now to us to just to protect their general populations really.
Yeah, so you talk a lot about like not being able to see your friends for a long time. Obviously, you're not able to see your parents either. And if you're comfortable answering this question, how has that
Uh-huh.
kind of disconnection made you feel emotionally, or like how motivated you are at work?
Um, the very yeah, I feel like it just makes me lonely, like to be straightforward, you know, not especially with my friends, because I had a lot of connections with them. We used to hang out on a weekly, not if not monthly basis, and now like I barely remember their face. And I'm a person that I don't use social media that often, so I don't go on FaceTiming or like chatting with them online. So I feel pretty much disconnected. Like with them, especially right now. I'm busy at work. Like I would come home not knowing who to contact because like by the time I finish, by the time I got home, it would be like 8, 9, and then by the time I got washed and settled, it's like past 10 o'clock. Nobody is really there for me, and then plus I have to work the next day. So I spend most of the time by myself, and that doesn't feel good, honestly. But um, I would say part of self care is like you have to figure out something to do, like things to do by yourself. And I kind of learned that as pandemic started. Like I started painting, I started, practice back, going back on my piano and my guitar. Trying to be emotionally supportive to myself instead of seeking out to my friends like how I used to do. Yeah, that's basically some changes.
And I guess just as a final question, you are talking
Mhm.
to like a largely high school audience. Is there anything you'd
Mhm.
like to tell high schoolers about what it's like to work on the front line?
Uh, it's fascinating. Yeah, it's fascinating. You see different things every day, and then you know that you're really taking care of people's lives. And as to your high schoolers, really, I hope you guys can join healthcare if you can. We're in huge need of people, and really, if you like to be on your feet, if you like to think on your feet, if you just like to be around people, seeing different faces every day, I would say healthcare is really a right field for you to come into. And yeah, like you might get like nervous and overwhelmed by what you see on TV, we're how we're like all packed everywhere, but we're still pretty organized. Like it's like the organized chaos that you can kind of see like things going on every day, and we'll be able to handle it. And yeah, if you just like changes, just come to healthcare really.
Nurse Hebe, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us today.
No worries, Albert.
Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Stories from the Frontline podcast series. Nurse Hebe's experiences are truly extraordinary, and I hope all who listen truly were able to learn something more about what it's like to work on the front line, especially as a new healthcare worker who's just entering the industry. I hope everyone enjoyed this podcast. Our next episode will be an interview with Matthew Laffey. He's a med student currently studying in Ireland. It's sure to be an interesting interview and one you don't want to miss out on. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.